Hey, this is Bader sharing my Eddie Yost collection. He's one of my favorite players, and I wanted to share Eddie because I think he's a special player. I think he's underappreciated. He's mostly been forgotten. I've never heard anybody really talk about him at all, but he had a special skill set. He was a great player. He was in Major League Baseball as a player coach for 40 years that he donned a uniform, and I think he's an incredibly relevant a player, but he's got a skill set that is underappreciated. So let's just talk about him a bit. So I'm just using these so you got something to look at before I share. These are secondary cards, and not part of my run. But Eddie was actually a stud player. He went to NYU, and he starred in basketball, and he starred in baseball. And as a 17-year-old, he was a bonus baby, and he was picked up by the Senators, and he went straight to the Washington Senators without having played a minor league game. And he got a few games in as a 17-year-old, so that's pretty impressive. Here we have his 1949 Bowman. This is his rookie card. I've got one in a beautiful shape here. It's not the most flattering picture. He actually looks like the Green Goblin. And I remember showing this to my wife, and she said, "That is not a good looking man." And I defended Eddie, and I said, that's not really what he looks like. It's not a great example. This is a better example. Here is his 1950 Bowman, which is a gorgeous card. Now, when he was with the Senators in 44, the very next year he got drafted in January, and he went into the Navy, where he served for 18 months. So he didn't play any Major League Baseball. He was serving the country. And at the end of that, he went back to the Senators and played again as a 19-year-old. He wasn't a full-time player, but he did get to play part-time. There was actually a conversation where Eddie wanted to go back. He wanted to go to the minors, and he never did play one game in the minors. And at the time, if you were a bonus baby and you paid, if you got sent down to the minors, any team could pick you up. And so the Griffiths were like, well, we can't let that happen. So they told him to write a letter to the commissioner to see if they could have like an exception made for him because of his military service. And they said no. So he stayed on the Major League club. But that didn't end up hurting him, because the very next year at 20, he became the full-time third baseman for that team. And here we go. This is a beautiful card. It's very much like the 50, just extended with his name on it. It's a gorgeous card. And on that team, he started to establish himself as one of the best third basemen in the league and proved to be incredibly durable. But the thing that really made him special was he was a leadoff man, and he had a great knack for getting on base. So get this, his nickname is the Walking Man. And he is currently 11th all time on the walk list, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you start thinking about, Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, Barry Bonds, Ricky Henderson, all these guys that walked a ton and had way more plate appearances than him, it really does start to become quite impressive. And at the time, walks aren't really, and they still aren't, they weren't considered to be very valuable. But the sheer volume that he did is just ridiculous. Here we go. This is his 1951 Topps. Cool looking card. This one's got a nice crease on there, so it's pretty until you get that to show. Someday I might upgrade that one, but for now, I'm happy to have it. So he led the league in walks 6 times, and he played for 14 full seasons, so 6 times, and 8 times he had over 100 walks. But if you listen to how many walks that he had, his totals were 151, 141, 135, 131, 129, 126, 125, 123. So he didn't have any years where he broke 100, where it was barely. I mean, he blew by those. And so they were incredible walking numbers. Here we got the 52 Bowman, which is my favorite. I think it's a beautiful card. Really like that a lot. And so his numbers were incredibly high. And keep in mind, if he led the league 6 times, think about that. That's Ted Williams is in the league. Mickey Mantle's in the league. Nobody wants to pitch to those guys. They had fantastic eyes, and people are afraid of them. Eddie Yost was a little different. They said that he was a pull hitter, and he wouldn't swing at any bad pitches, but then he would actively try to yank strikes down the foul, try to foul him off until he got another bad pitch and let it go. And that was an art he had. He once had 13 swinging foul balls in a row in a game, and the very next at bat, he had 7. So he fouled off 20 pitches in 2 at bats. That's insane. Here we go. Here's a 1952 Topps. I got this early on before I started caring more about centering, and I think I bought it more for the grade than the actual card. It's a beautiful card. It looks like it's almost just out of a pack, but it's off-centered there. But it's a good-looking card. One thing I think is interesting here is what this is. It looks like it's a reflection of like a train going by or a bus or something, but I don't know what that is. Any guesses? Any knowledge? Anybody know? All right, there we go. Couple other things about Eddie. Eddie did have some power, but it doesn't look like he did. He led the league in doubles one year. He led his team in home runs multiple times. But the problem is with the Senators is their field, the Griffith Stadium, is enormous. So it was 405 feet down the left field line. And then 1954, they shortened it to 350. 350 is still a pretty good shot, but playing a lot of your career as a pull hitter in a giant cavernous field like that was difficult. So like between 1944, here's his 53 Bowman. Between 44 and 53, he hit 55 home runs, and only 3 of them were at home. So it's very reasonable to think that he would have hit around 100 home runs during that span instead of 55. And the whole team was that way. Anybody who was a right-hander, there was years where they only had like 7 home runs the entire year to left field. Here we have his 54 Bowman. I just picked that up recently. I had 3 other copies, but none of them were beautiful like this, and I really wanted a clean copy. And it was incredibly affordable, and that's one of the things that I love about these unsung heroes. You can have vintage collection. You don't have to pay a lot of money. You don't have to sacrifice good quality cards. You just have to be willing. You just have to be willing to not have the marquee guys as players you really like, which just means we have to look these people up and hear about their history and find out more about them. And that's what my attempt is here, so that other people can appreciate some of these players like I do. In 1954, they shortened the fields, but it was still a big field, and home runs started to raise a little bit, but it was still a very difficult field to hit home runs in. Here we go. Here his 54 Red Heart, which is probably I guess you could say it's the centerpiece of my collection of Eddie Yost. This is definitely the most money I spent on any Eddie Yost card. It's not a Mantle, it's not a Musial, it's not the Warren Spahn, but it's a beautiful card, and it's Eddie Yost, who I love, and so I'm super happy with that. And I would have paid more for it, so I'm grateful that other people don't appreciate him the way that I do. All right, he continued to have good years, and he led the league in runs one year, on-base percentage a couple times. He scored over 100 runs 5 times, which is really incredibly impressive considering he was on the Senators, and they were bottom dwellers all the time. They didn't finish higher than 5th in all 9 seasons. So very consistently, who's the worst team? It was the Senators. So to score 100 runs on a losing team like that is pretty darn good. Here we have his 55 Bowman. And the 55 Bowman is one of my favorite cards of all time. And it's for a slightly different reason, because I'm not a fan of the 55 set. I do think that it's a good-looking card. I like the pose. I like the imagery behind it and everything else. But it's really because of the back. And this is my favorite back of any baseball card of any time. Eddie was given the chance to give advice to youngsters, and this is what he says. He says, "Any boy who is interested in playing baseball must be willing to sacrifice. He must be unselfish, he must cooperate, he must possess team spirit, and above all, he must have a sincere interest in the wonderful game of baseball, being willing to work hard in order to improve. A good adage for him to remember is that dreams plus dreams equal dreams, but dreams plus action equals success. This applies not only to baseball, but also to all fields of endeavor. And I'm afraid that I had that too close. It was blurry. I was reading it off the card, but what a great message to send out. I'm just picturing back in 1955, you've got kids buying baseball cards for the gum and seeing their heroes, and people look at the back of that and they look at what Eddie has to say there, and it's such a great message, and it just resonates with me. I almost want to like take it, blow it up, and like stick it on my wall in my gym or something like that. Here's another 55 Bowman, but this one was signed. It's one of my favorite cards, and I had the opportunity to have one signed, and it's very cost effective. So in terms of banging for the buck in the hobby, that one was an absolute gem. Here we go to one of my favorite sets of all time, the 56 Topps. And I've noticed, I've done a couple of videos where I've recorded myself. I'm dyslexic, and so it's not unusual for me to say something like 1959, and it's actually a 1969, and it's actually a 1959 card. So sometimes I'll be off by an entire decade, and I'll watch it and I go, but I know that. So my apologies for any errors or miscues that I give. But here is the 56 Topps. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I love what's going on here. Eddie's pretty much always smiling. He looks like he's happy and he enjoys the game. We've got a beautiful image right here of him hustling and making a play at home plate. Umpire in the background, stadium in the back. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous card. Absolutely, absolutely love it. The difference between the 56 and the 57 Topps is just amazing. This is what I think happened. And I have not heard this, but I think in 1956, they were still competing with Bowman. And I mean that in terms of like, the card came out and issued in 56, but you know they were working on it and they were getting it ready in 55. And I think they were still competing and they were coming out with this masterpiece. And then at the end of 55, they go, hey, we did it. Bowman's out. And we don't have to compete with him anymore. So this is what they came up with the following year, which it's a cool card. The 57 Topps. This is the standard size that they use for baseball cards now. Also, something that I absolutely love, it's the first time you see all the stats on the back. And I think that is absolutely huge. I don't hear people talk enough about how this was, to me, in baseball cards, historic. This is a hugely relevant set for the back. The front, however, is a little on the blah side, but here we go. It's the 57 Topps. Eddie Yost. All right, and here we have the last card of Eddie Yost in a Washington Senators jersey. We've got the 58 Topps. Beautiful yellow background, batting pose. He was still playing pretty well, but they had a dilemma, and the dilemma was they had a fantastic young player coming up, and they needed to open up third base, and that player was Harmon Killebrew. And as much as I love Eddie Yost, and as much as I think he's incredibly underrated, I still would take Harmon Killebrew over Eddie Yost, as I think most would. All right, and here we go. It's the first time we see him in a different uniform, exposing that big, beautiful bald head of his. I don't know why they have so many portrait pictures with players with their ball caps off. You see it here. You start seeing it a lot in the 61 set. But here he is with the Tigers, and something crazy happens. So he leaves the giant field of Griffith Stadium, and he goes to Tiger Stadium, which is a more friendly park. And he has a fantastic year with the Tigers. He has an all-time high for home runs. He hits over 21 home runs. He leads the league in runs. He leads the league on base percentage. The changing of the field and a better offensive team. You know, you got an Al Klein batting after you and a Norm Cash. He did not have that with the Senators. So his numbers really took a big jump. And then the year after, in 1960, He had a very good season again, but he was starting to slow down. His legs were feeling it. He lost some speed. But offensively, he was still doing his job getting on base. I know that I have a 1960 Topps somewhere, and for some reason, I can't find it. So I think I misplaced it. I'll have to get another one. Here is his post, which is a cool card. It's the first one that shows him in the Tigers uniform. And then we have 1961. This is one of my favorite sets. When I started making building a set, this is the first one I started working on. I'm really glad that he's got a ball cap on there. So here he is with Los Angeles. He ended up getting picked up because the Tigers didn't protect him, and with the expansion team, they were able to, I guess, draft unprotected players, and they picked up Eddie Yost. And Eddie Yost is the first batter in Angels history. So he had the first at-bat in a Major League game by the Angels. And here we have the 62 post. And then this is his last year as well with the 62 Topps. It's a reused photo of the 61 Topps. Same image. Very difficult to get with good borders. Happy with that guy. And then I don't know if they ended up, because there's so many cards where they use the same picture. I don't know if they decided why to use a different image. Maybe they thought, or maybe it's backwards. Maybe they made this card first, and here he is in a batting pose. I don't know if they made this one first, but they didn't like the overall quality because all of them look a little weird with his face looks a little fuzzy, and it's not the greatest coloring, and that's just like a normal thing with this card. I don't know which one came first, but this one I was super excited about. I got it for $1 on eBay with free shipping, which blows my mind. And if you look at it, it's absolutely sharp, sharp, sharp. That's one of the best looking borders of a 62 I've ever seen. But it got a 3, which really surprised me. And I kept looking at it, and you will not be able to see it because it really takes the right amount of light and everything else. But it looks like the card has a light curve. It's not even a crease. It almost looks like it was sitting there and maybe somebody put something on it and it weighed it and it just made it turn slightly. But I can't see it at all, so I love it. Wish it didn't say a 3, but I'm okay with that. All right, can we still see that? We can. All right, I got 2 more cards. That was the end of his playing days career. And then he became a coach. So he coached for the Senators under Mickey Vernon. And then he coached with under Gil Hodges when Gil Hodges took over from Mickey Vernon. And then eventually he was on staff with the New York Yankees under Yogi Berra. And then he finally finished up with the Red Sox. But here he is. He started doing coaches cards, and you can see there's the Yogi Berra. But we got Eddie Yost on there. And then the next year, 74, they put out a card again, and there he is again with Eddie Yost. And actually, when Gil Hodges passed away, he had a heart attack while golfing, and Eddie Yost was with him when that happened, and that must have been a difficult thing to really go through and see. But I want to talk about how good Eddie is a little bit, and I'm going to do it in kind of a weird way, and I want to compare him to an all-time great, somebody who I was a huge fan of when I was a kid. And I hope nobody gets mad at me for this, because I'm not going to say that he's as good as this other player, but there's certain things where you look at it and you go, that is a bit different. So I'm going to talk about Tony Gwynn. Tony Gwynn is a fantastic player. This is actually a childhood card. I've probably had this for 30 years, and it's still in the cool screw-down case. I never took it out. But here's some things about Eddie Yost compared to Tony Gwynn. Now, Tony Gwynn, I think he's 6, 7-time batting champion, best Padre ever. And in the last 40 years, in terms of just a pure hitter, I don't think there's a better pure hitter than Tony Gwynn. And so you got to think, okay, well, hey, Tony Gwynn, you're comparing him to Eddie Yost. Who's got a better chance of getting on base? I don't think everybody would say, well, Tony Gwynn, but it's actually Eddie Yost. Eddie Yost has a better on-base percentage than Tony Gwynn. So career OBP for Eddie is 394 to Gwynn's 388. It's close. But if we look at some other things, how about home runs? Tony Gwynn was not known as a home run hitter. He had 135 in his career. Eddie Yost only had 4 more. He had 139. But he had 1,055 less plate appearances. And on top of that, like I said before, he played at that absolutely enormous stadium where if he played anywhere else, he would have hit another 50 home runs. So the argument could be made, Eddie Yost has more power than Tony Gwynn, and he's better at getting on base than Tony Gwynn. Those things are true. Now, having said that, Tony Gwynn was the man. I'd take Tony Gwynn over Eddie Yost, but it does make you think a little bit. On one hand, I've got an all-time great first ballot Hall of Famer comparing him to another player, and there's some stuff where you go, hey, maybe this isn't as far apart as we think it is, and he's completely unappreciated. So that's my Eddie Yost run, and that's a bit of his history. Oh, and I'll say another thing too. Eddie Yost was incredibly well respected in the sport. He was liked by everyone. There is stories about him honoring his contract, always trying to do things in the right way. You had ownership who loved him. He was a team guy. He always hustled. He was a fantastic role model and a great ambassador of the sport. So let's not forget Eddie Yost. All right, that's my sharing. Bader out. See you again.